burning inside, the hurting and the suffering. Minds creating anger, fear and pain, suffocating our times. The tougher it gets, the rougher social media cries. But we see to it that we tweeting only negative lines. We're sick and tired of history, but repeating it twice. Greed, anger and violence, clearly stealing our nights. Feeling it tight between the shoulders with a chill in the spine. Pinching myself, waking up, trying to stop the rewind and move forward towards stories, overcoming our fears. Choosing love over hate, praying, trading hugs over tears. There's only one choice, breaking down the walls and repair every broken heart on this planet till there's no longer fear.
Walls can't hold us in. Fear can't keep us down. Love will rise again. Yeah, it's rising right now. We shall overcome.
Every time I think it's gonna take much longer,
We shall overcome.
every time I question, am I getting stronger?
We have just begun.
Gonna make a change, we gotta push much farther.
We shall overcome.
We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. Young Gandhi couldn't fathom how to deal with himself when he was thrown off the train and the pain that he felt. Mrs. Parks disrespected, dragged into jail because of the color of his skin, organs, tissues, and cells. One day, a young girl was shot on a bus by a man, a terrorist, part of the Taliban. He said, "On this land, you have no right to stand for what you believe in. Girls have no chance here." Well, now, that's just the story of three souls who shook our planet after being down on their knees. And it's not gonna stop. Those seeds have now become trees, and as human beings, we'll keep on digging till we find peace.
Yeah, the cynics always say that nothing ever changes. The human nature's bound to stay the same. But it couldn't be more plain that violence never pays, injustice never stays. It's bound to fade away. What if history awaits? What if today's the day? We already know the way, so let's all lead the way. We shall overcome.
Every time I think it's gonna take much longer,
We shall overcome.
every time I question, am I getting stronger?
We have just begun.
Gonna make a change, we gotta push much farther.
We shall overcome.
We shall overcome. Come on.
I will carry on. Yeah, I will carry on. Long after we're gone, the roots of the tree we plant will be strong.
Yeah, come on. Yep. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe that we shall overcome someday.
Makes me wanna sing now. We shall overcome.
Every time I think it's gonna take much longer,
We shall overcome.
every time I question, am I getting stronger?
We shall overcome.
Gonna make a change, we gotta push much farther.
Someday.
'Cause I'm feeling it deep in my heart.
Deep in my heart,
I do believe.
I do believe.
I do believe.
We shall overcome someday.
Come on, put your hearts together. Here we go. Woo! I knew it. God had a plan for us to do it. To hit rock bottom before we rise and continue. To first learn greed before we learn to be human. To do wrong deeds before we learn to spread beauty. There's always a plan, and now it's time to take a stand for the rights of the planet, every woman and man. We ain't gonna stop, only growing our demands for all beings to feel peace in every heart and land. Thank you, Lord, for the strength and the courage to bring us together and keep our souls nourished. These tough times will only drown in our chorus, cause we all believe that the truth is before us. We shall overcome this pain. We shall overcome this day. We pray for love to lead the way.
We shall overcome.
regularly listen to hip hop or rap. That's what I thought. So that guy, the guy with the hat, Nimo Patel, look him up online. Interesting story. I'd never heard of him before until I started seeing his videos and hearing his music online, this kind of stuff. Apparently he was a big deal. He made a lot of money in the hip-hop world and was writing stuff and producing stuff, and he had all of it. He had the big cars and houses and the drugs and that lifestyle, and he bottomed out. He was done. Like, he was just living what he thought of as a meaningless life. And he had a God experience, and it changed his direction. And now what he's about is using his music and his talent and his love for people to make a difference in the world. And all his music is available for free. And he lives on an ashram in India and spends his time spreading the values of Gandhi, about people getting along, about overcoming difference, about how love is more powerful than all the other forces at work in the world. Kind of a neat guy. So once in a while I'll share some of his stuff because I think he's pretty cool. Maybe we'll all get converted to hip-hop music. I don't know. I forgot to say during the announcement time that for the family faith nights, like this Wednesday, I want to do a craft with the kids and families that involves cutting out pictures from magazines of people. So I need magazines, family situations, people doing stuff. So if you could drop those off during the week, we'll have hopefully things to cut up for Wednesday. If you've ever done any exploring, any reading, any listening, or looking online, learning about the writings of mystics. Now, mystics are people who feel almost like a direct connection to the divine, to the holy, to God at work in the world. If you ever read any mystics or listen to what they have to say, it seems to me that whatever their religious background, whatever part of the world they're from, whatever their culture and language is, many of them have in common the confident, powerful claim that God is so immense, so enveloping, so accepting, so inclusive, and so present everywhere. You can never get away from God. God is always all around us. And that when you rest in God's love, all the petty differences between humans suddenly seem small and really not very important. Some of those mystics will describe God and God's love like a great big hug, like a vast and warm embrace in which we can all be held. Like it says in one of the old hymns, safe and secure from all alarms, just held in God's love. What could trouble us or make us to act out to harm or try to control anyone else if we knew we were all just so loved? We are. We are all equally and completely cherished, loved by God. How wonderful it would be if that prayerful, mystical experience of just resting in God's love, if we could take that with us into all parts of life. Anyone here ever study Buddhism? One of the basic tenets of some streams of Buddhism is that the object of life is to learn to let go of everything that separates us from others, that would lead us into conflict or competition with other beings. Let all that fall away. And if we do that, the more we do that, the closer it can be that we feel at peace or at one with all living beings. Which leads me to a joke. It's not a great joke, but it's the only one I got. I've also seen this as a cartoon. And there'll be this picture of the Buddha, or sometimes it's the Dalai Lama, standing at a hot dog cart. Could be on a city street, or could be outside Canadian Tire. The hot dog vendor says, "How can I help you?" And the Buddha or the Dalai Lama says, Make me one with everything. Yeah, I know, it's not great. But that... Larry went, oh! It also, you can switch out the hot dog cart and you can make it a pizza place, right? Make me one with everything. It's not a great joke. I'm glad at least one person laughed. Two, that's good. But the idea of being at peace with everyone, everything, with all living things, what a wonderful possibility. When St. Paul, one of the early great Christian missionaries, traveled to Athens, that's the reading that Jennifer did for us. He went to a part of Athens called the Areopagus. It was a time-honored place for discussion and debate. It's also called Mars Hill. The Ares part, Areopagus, Ares is the Greek name for the god of war. Mars would be the Roman name. So the Areopagus or Mars Hill. Now, Paul goes there, and maybe he expected to end up in a battle. He got up to talk to the people who were gathered there, but he didn't get a battle. Maybe he was surprised because they were all willing to listen to him, to hear what he had to say. He said, "It's plain to see that you Athenians take your religion seriously. When I arrived here the other day, I was fascinated with all the shrines I came across. And then I found one inscribed to the God nobody knows." He says, "Well, I'm here to introduce you to this God so you can worship intelligently and know who you're dealing with." He goes on to say, "The God who made the world and everything in it, this master of sky and land, doesn't live in custom-made shrines or need the human race to run errands. God makes the creatures don't make God. Starting from scratch, God made the entire human race, made the earth hospitable, with plenty of time and space for living so we could seek after God. And not just grope around in the dark, but actually find God. God doesn't play hide and seek with us. God is not remote. God is near. We live and move in God, can't get away from God. We live and move in God." So Paul, maybe you know some of Paul's story. St. Paul, we call him, because he's remembered as a particularly good example, powerful, holy man. Before he was Paul, he was Saul. He was raised as a Jew, was a teacher of the Jewish law. He had a conversion experience. He became Paul, left behind his old life, became a missionary. He felt called personally by the risen Christ to spread the good news about God's love as he learned about it through the teachings of Jesus. Now, Paul's interesting because if you look at his story in the New Testament, he was not one of the followers who met Jesus while Jesus was on earth. Paul's experience of the risen Christ was a mystical one. He had like a direct connection, and it changed his life. It turned him into a missionary. And everywhere he traveled, all over the Roman Empire, because he was a Roman citizen, he met people who had their own religions, their own local cultures, their own stories of faith. There were local ones, and then there were the official Roman gods, which if you were under Rome, you had to pay homage to the official Roman gods. A little bit like paying taxes, I think. I was thinking about Eleanor Walker's comment about we won't put up the yard signs until after October 21st. Is that because you don't want to confuse people about which turkey they should go for? I'm just asking. People in the ancient world were used to having a lot of gods to choose from. In some places they had gods for particular things. The god for planting, the god for harvest, the god of wine, the god of the hearth and household. So Paul's walking around Athens, and he spots this monument to an unknown God, one called the God nobody knows. Maybe that was the one to cover all the bases. That was the fill in the blanks, all the stuff they didn't remember to make a God for. This is the everything else God. Paul used the site of that monument to make a claim for his preferred God. Now, raised as Jews, both Paul and Jesus, they had been taught that there really only is one God, the maker of the universe, the one that Jesus taught us to see as a loving parent, the one who cares about each of us deeply. So the one who makes everything knows each one of us. So Paul gets up in front of those people at the Areopagus in Athens, and he makes a case that they didn't have to carve statues to little gods so they could have a God right in their own house or down the street. They didn't need those because God was already with them. Everywhere. All around. Now, the book of Acts, which is where this story came from, reports that there were a few people who responded that day to Paul. They were moved by his teachings, and he gained a handful of followers that day in Athens. They were interested in what he had to say. And they went on to learn about what Paul knew of the teachings of Jesus. Now, there's no indication in that story that huge numbers of Athenians dropped their old ways, gave up the religion they'd been raised in to follow Paul's new religion. So if Paul's goal that day had been to convince everybody in town that his religion was better than theirs, he failed. But actually, you know what? I don't even know if that was his goal. Was that the point? Actually, I hope not. I want to believe that St. Paul was better than that. Now, when I was growing up, one of the ideas that influenced me for a while was that the goal of Christianity was to get everybody, to convert everybody. That our church here would be like a mission place, and our goal was to convert, convince, connect with everybody in the town around us, and then the county beyond that, and then the whole country. That was our job. Well, how are we doing? I don't think we had that one on straight. When you go with that kind of thinking, and we got to get everybody, what ends up happening is in our minds and our hearts, we divide the world into those who are saved, like us, and those who ain't saved yet, like them. So you got a them and us, right? And right away with the them and us comes, we're us. Ain't we something? We got God. We can explain it to people. We can explain God to people. They need our way. And we can measure how successful we are by how many people we convert. We can have a scorecard of how many souls we won over. Well, that way of thinking about God and God's work, I think it has good and bad about it. The good is that many people have got the chance to hear about Jesus because of folks who thought it was really, really important to let them know. That's a good thing. On the other hand, a lot of harm has been done in the name of spreading that gospel. Sometimes the zeal to win converts has been used to justify treating people poorly, to judge them, to frighten them, to look at them as second class, until and unless they get saved and join the club of us, the righteous. And in that, there has not always been a whole lot of respect for other religions, for other cultures, for other ways of thinking, of doing, of living a faithful life. We don't have to look very far. All we need to look at is the stories about residential schools in Canada. the United Church of Canada ran a bunch of residential schools. And we, as a church, accepted government money to run schools that were designed from the beginning to reprogram little First Nations kids, essentially to make them white. They weren't allowed to speak their language, to dress the way they'd been brought up. They had to abandon all their customs. They couldn't dance or sing or make art or do anything from the old life. They were taught trades. They were taught to be little white kids. Now, there were some good and kind folks who worked at the residential schools. I've known some of them. I've met some. But the idea behind the whole thing, the institutions that were created to do this work, and some of the colleagues that worked in those places, they did really terrible things in Jesus' name. We know that not everything done in the name of religion has been loving or kind or faithful, and that is just so painfully ironic. I was doing some reading recently about the word religion. The word religion comes from a Latin word. How many people studied Latin when they were younger? So do you know this? Religio? That word? That's one of the roots for the word religion. It's connected to the same word for ligament. Ligaments are that material in the body that holds the bones together, keeps the vital organs in place. So religion, at its best, should be something that connects, not divides, brings together, not separates. Religion is meant, at its best, to connect people to God and to everybody else. Not to break us up into little groups, one thinking that they're better than the other. One looking down their nose at others because they do things different, or they speak a different language, or their name for God is different than ours. The people in my own life who did the best job of getting me interested in really following Jesus, living a Christian life, weren't the ones who were really good preachers. Weren't the ones who knew their Bible backwards and forwards. Weren't the ones who talked about God all the time. They were the ones that you just knew they loved you. You just felt God's love flowing through them. They had a God connection that made me want a God connection too. Usually it's in acts of kindness, of mercy, of respect, of peace. That's the stuff. So what if we were to take Paul at his word? He's talking to the Athenians who have all kinds of different religions, all kinds of different names for God and gods and all these ideas. He says, you don't have to make statues for God. You don't have to build up your own little way of worshiping God, because God is all around us. We live and move in God all the time. So then maybe the goal isn't to bring people to God. We don't have to, because we're already in God. Maybe it's more about connecting, feeling connected to each other and to the God that's all around us. Maybe that would let us shift the goal, the purpose of the church, from trying to change everybody to be just like us. Oh, we're pretty good, but we don't need everyone to be just like us. And maybe instead we could focus on just loving them, showing respect, looking for ways to work together, looking for ways to help each other, like God's already doing. We're all made by the one Creator. We're all related. We're all in God's family. And always, the similarities amongst us are way greater than the things we think make us different, the things we cling on to stay separate. Amen.